Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of Always Right Reviews. I am your host, SonicMTD, and to those of you that are tuning in for the very first time ever, I would like to welcome you to my series. I would like to very briefly wish everybody a very belated New Year's. This video should have been up right before New Year's, but as a result of, the friends and family running around and trying to be supportive for them, as well as the amount of hourly investment needed in a JRPG in order to complete it, I felt that it would have been too rushed had I released it on the original day, and luckily I was able to take a couple more weeks perfecting it, honing it, making sure that all the rough parts were taken out, so that this prime piece of content will be at its best, and that you will certainly enjoy it. But either way, I have taken up enough of your time. Let's get to the review. So without further ado, let's start the show.
The goal of this show, at least to me at this point, is to showcase some of my favorite pieces of media and explain why I thoroughly enjoy them. This, of course, is in the hopes that someone might want to pick it up in the future. In a lot of ways, I consider this season akin to a bucket list. In the event something happens to me in life where I don't have the ability to do these videos anymore, I want to make sure that I tied up all loose ends in one fell swoop. I mean, sure, there's the added bonus of reviewing something that you hate with the goal of tearing it to shreds and basking in the subscribers, but that's not really my style right now. The scenario that I propose to the audience is what happens when, as a reviewer, you're given a piece of content that you were honestly looking forward to, and it becomes a devastating letdown. So much so that it affects not only the way you perceive the content, but the way you perceive the company. This is the state in which I find myself today. Earlier this season, I reviewed Valkyria Chronicles, a beloved series that I hold very near and dear to my heart. When the announcement of a future game in the Valkyria franchise, Valkyria Revolution, debuted in June 2017, I went out and grabbed a copy hoping to see an improvement to the game I knew and loved. And boy, was I wrong. Come join me once again as I delve into one of Sega's biggest misfires and attempt to try to see what could have been done to make a better game as I review Valkyria Revolution for the PlayStation 4. Valkyria Revolution is the fourth installation to Sega's Valkyria franchise. It was released on January 2017 in Japan and then imported to the West in June. The game was developed by Media Vision, who are known for the Wild Arms franchise as well as the Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth games. Valkyria Azure Revolution was directed by Takashi Ozawa, who directed Valkyria Chronicles 3 Unrecorded Chronicles and helped design the original Valkyria Chronicles on the PS3. It goes without saying that Valkyria Revolution is a spin-off, which is made even more confusing as Sega is going to be releasing Valkyria Chronicles 4 in 2018. Welcome back to Europa, but not really. The year is 1853, but not really. Look, remember the last review? While the continent of Europa retains the same name, this is an alternate universe. The setting is very akin to, say, a Final Fantasy in that all the technology is presented in a part fantasy, part steampunkish vibe. The country's names, provinces, technology, and overall world of the story is absolutely different from the Valkyria Chronicles universe, and thus, there's no continuity. I can make that claim because this story occasionally jumps 101 years into the future to 1954, where there's no mention at all about the other games or conflicts going on at the time. Valkyria Revolution is the story of the Circle of Five, a band of orphans who plunged their country Jutland into war in order to get revenge on the Ruzi Empire. Leading the Circle of Five is Shadow the Hedgehog, Amleth Gronkair. He's super edgy, riddled with angst, and desperately trying to find a girl named Maria. Stop me if you've heard this one before! Amleth is tasked with leading an anti-Valkyria squadron comprised of those who have an unnatural sensitivity to Ragnite. Pulling strings behind the scenes and setting up political motivation for going to war is Solomon Kallenberg. He's cold, calculating, and willing to do just about anything to achieve his goals. Providing financial backing for the war is Basil Sabanchi. Wisecracking, free-spirited, and with a moderately good heart, Basil is a relatively flashy person who likes making serious decisions by coin toss. Look, I'm not gonna lie here. I have a lot of similar personality traits with Basil, and it's kind of unsettling. He uses his adoptive father's Ragnite manufacturing business to outfit Amleth with weapons and help financially support the war. Spurring the populace with propaganda and newspaper columns is Freet Eriksson. He's a gentle soul who believes that the pen is mightier than the sword. Oftentimes, though, Freed is constantly questioning his motivation and walks the fine line between being found out, which is kinda weird because, well, infiltrating the world of espionage and acting as a spy is Violet Sand. She's an incredibly flirty and confident and is kind of a really rubbish spy. During the entire game, Violet doesn't really change costume. She puts on a wig and acts out the persona Margaretha, but she's wearing the exact same clothes throughout the entire game. I don't know about you, but when I get a haircut but don't really change anything else about me, people still know who I am. If you look at Violet's clothes, they are very flashy and unique. They turn heads, which is fine and dandy, but this game forgets Violet is in the world of espionage. You mean to tell me the enemy doesn't have spies also trying to do the same thing and wouldn't be able to pick her out of a lineup? Sorry, I digress. The Revenge of the Circle of Five is a great premise to start, however, everything else in this game is disjointed and doesn't flow in an immersive way. Amlet's anti-Valkyrian squadron, aka Vanargund, is comprised of anime tropes from the macho, beer-drinking veteran soldier Daryl Ramadal, the incredibly serious and emotionally damaged Brigitte Ulrich, the bubbly and borderline Gyaru Sarah Benner, and even the princess of the goddamn country, Ophelia Augusta, are but some of the quirky characters to choose from, which doesn't really mesh with the dark themes of Revenge. For example, during the beginning of the game, Amlet's entire squad is palling around, and then when the mission ends, it shows Amlet slaughtering a main general of the opposing faction. The main setting for Valkyria Revolution is the Kingdom of Jutland. Jutland is a small nation who decides to go to war because all the surrounding nations have placed an embargo on them, cutting off food, supplies, and medicine to the people. It just so happens that the Ruzi Empire, who are the closest to Jutland and possess a ridiculous amount of military might, also happen to be responsible for burning the Circle of Five's orphanage to the ground. They burned down an orphanage, killing children, and even kidnapping their teacher. The Ruzi Empire are so cartoonishly evil, even Cobra Commander is saying to tone it down. Their Emperor Claudius is incredibly arrogant, acts like he has a divine right to rule all of Europa, and doesn't care about the loss of human life needed to achieve it. I'm serious when I say that the Emperor and 4 of his Grand Generals show up and burn down the protagonist's orphanage. How stupid do you think the audience is? I honestly doubt a world leader with a massive military might would get its hands dirty, on top of diverting high-ranking military officials away from their posts. Claudius would have sent a black operations team to handle the wet work. I mean, Claudius is so cliche and illogical that it just feels alien. Claudius also happens to be in the possession of a Valkyria, which is basically the spirit of an ancient mystical race who inhibit the bodies of those who happen to have a high sensitivity to Ragnite. Claudius plans on using his military might and the Valkyria to rule all of Europa. It just so happens that our little revenge plot managed to be at the right place at the right time for it not to make the Circle of Five massive dicks. Without that, though, you can almost make the argument that Amleth and his co-conspirators are just as bad as the people they're trying to stop. Almost. There's a lot that's wrong with the story, and I will get to the nitpicky stuff later on in the review. What I need to focus on now, though, is the actual gameplay. Valkyria Revolution completely abandons their pre-existing combat system in favor of the more modern active time battle system. In active time battle, you can move, block, and dodge in real time, however being able to attack, support, and use items is constricted behind a charge meter. When the meter is full, you can let loose a wide variety of physical and alchemical attacks. Alchemical attacks are governed by your mana bar, in which the spells you equip your weapon can do a wide variety of different things. You can attack single or multiple opponents using different elements such as earth, wind, water, fire. Card captors of the cloud expect the unexpected. Who touched my script? Now, Valkyria Revolution doesn't flat out say there's magic in it, but being able to channel mana and alchemical style attacks is definitely clashing with rules and world building from the previous 3 games. The gameplay style offered by Valkyria Chronicles installments are, pun intended, revolutionary. Its mix of turn-based strategy, a la the Advance Wars series, and having live-action interception fire, so units don't just stand around while a character makes a beeline for the objective, set it apart from other games in the genre. Valkyria Revolution basically loses what helped set it apart from everyone else, and basically becomes a combination Final Fantasy Dynasty Warriors clusterfuck. If a teammate goes down in combat, there's no sense of urgency that the previous games held, and if I lose everybody, I just get kicked back into the main menu with no lasting consequences. The combat essentially boils down to spamming the bosses with alchemy attacks they're weak against too, and then giving those characters items that replenishes their mana. This isn't nuanced strategy, this is fucking dogpiling. Sometimes if your mission takes too long and goes into the night, the Valkyria makes an appearance, and if you don't make a beeline for the goal, say goodbye to your team. The problem with this though is when the Valkyria is going to arrive, an operatic theme plays to invoke a sense of panic and dread in the player. When I hear it though, I feel tranquil and calm, which I can only assume is the exact opposite of what the game devs wanted. I mentioned earlier that you're given Princess Ophelia as a squad mate of Vandergant. Ophelia can utilize the power of a Galder, which are auditory spells that can affect those around them. Essentially, she's a bard. She has 2 spells, one of which instantly heals the entire team and displaces negative status effects. The other causes the enemy to panic and makes them more susceptible to lowering their defense. The problem with this though is that A, they use the exact same song for both attacks, and B, the song that they use is their country's national anthem. Look, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude here, but the only ones who are able to make a national anthem a healing and yet terrifying experience are Radiohead. Thematically, it looks good on paper because the Valkyria uses her Galder to kill and promote darkness, whereas Ophelia is healing and light. However, this is an overused trope, and I'm just incredibly sick of it. In Valkyria Revolution, the Valkyria is a spirit which has inhabited so many lives that her knowing paranormal stuff is moderately acceptable. But Ophelia was never taught about Galders. It's a hell of a coincidence that she, and only she, can summon such power. Am I to believe that Ophelia is just gifted? Or is it possible in the world that Ozawa-san helped create, no one else sings, and thus doesn't know that they have that power? Either way, it's just sloppy writing. I'm not done yet, by the way. We still have 2 more parts that need to be dissected before I move on. You have a command room where you go on a wide variety of missions which don't really matter in the overall grand scheme of things. Basically, it's a poorly thought out invade and defend system where you would do missions in enemy territory in the hopes of taking it over. Likewise, the Ruzi Empire will try to take over your land and limit the amount of resources at your disposal. The problem with this, though, is that there are invisible boundaries that are not disclosed to the player and are locked based on story progression. This game completely sucks at explaining the core features. In a world where you might be inclined to play something else, there isn't a place where you can refresh yourself in the rules and key features this game shoddily establishes. One of the most bizarre choices Valkyria Revolutions makes is the implementation of social circles. As you progress in the game, your characters meet up in the hub world and essentially give you the opportunity of unlocking new potentials. The problem with this is that there is no clear path that determines how these social circles unlock. I tried doing multiple missions using specific characters, but that does nothing. It's really just random chance. Play a mission, check the circle menu, and if it says there's a new social circle activated, run out and grab it. The social circle system turned one of the core aspects of Valkyria Chronicles into a disappointing slog. And even after unlocking, they don't really activate, and it just feels like a complete and total waste of resources and manpower. In Valkyria Chronicles, unlocking potentials made sense. If you wanted to unlock potentials for Susie Evans, for example, you take out enemies, capture command posts, heal allies, and rescue fallen soldiers. Then after realizing Susie's humanitarian potential makes her completely useless, you promptly never use her again. It was a simpler time back then. So the question that's been plaguing my mind is, there's so many issues with Valkyria Revolution, what could I have done to make a better game? Well, here we go. From the gameplay side, I want to make it apparent I absolutely hate Dynasty Warrior-styled combat, as well as active time battle. However, there's nothing I can do to change the core foundation without creating a new game altogether, which, by that point, I'd ask Sega to put me on the payroll. What can be done is changing the social circle system so that they are tied to character action versus randomization. If you're going to do the command room invade and defend style gameplay, maybe you should implement which territories are locked behind future story progress. It's quite apparent the reason why the command room is in place is a means of getting players to grind for XP. My question is, why implement grinding? If you're going to have to blatantly implement grinding in a game, it usually means that there's a lack of content to hit that JRPG level of hourly investment. The best game developers know how to disguise grinding as side quests or bonus features. For example, you don't have to fully renovate Ezio Auditore's home of Monteriggioni in Assassin's Creed 2 in order to complete the game. However, I personally sunk hours upon hours of gameplay playing Extreme Town Makeover. Make it so that there is an actual reason players would want to sink hours into grinding. Maybe something that might utilize unused settings like the Bumbling Bard or the Royal Cemetery. Now, here comes the story. My Bread and Butter, and Valkyria Revolution's Hindrance. It's obviously apparent Valkyria Revolution is tonally dissonant. You have the dark subject matter of revenge masquerading as liberation from economic blockade. The main center of focus should have been the Circle of Five and them setting up the foundations of going to war. Fill it with emotionally tense situations of espionage and intrigue, making the player walk the fine line of will they, won't they get busted before the plan comes together. Having the inevitable crisis of conscience should have been when the war begins. You now have a growing body count on your hands. Amleth shouldn't feel remorseful at the end of Chapter 9 of an 11-chapter game. If you play it like that, then you're making a point that people you don't know are expendable in your quest for revenge. So get rid of Hans's death. And for that matter, if you're going to kill off Godot Villefort and just replace him with his sister, who plays the exact same, then it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It didn't work when Beerfest did it, it doesn't work here. Hell, Ophelia finds out anyway via Godot's notes, and it still doesn't negatively affect her. And while I'm on the subject of squadmates, can we make it so that some of them aren't giant cliches? Sometimes you don't have to reveal an entire character's motivation and backstory via dialogue. Restraint can pay great dividends because it gives characters an air of mystery. And did we need Claudius and his generals to be the ones directly responsible for burning down the orphanage? As I said earlier, Claudius could have ordered it and have Amleth and his group hunt down the hit squad, getting their revenge and then realizing the bigger threat. They could have come together for the greater good. And also, did we really have to make the enemy's Valkyria rock a G-cup? It's so apparent who the enemy's Valkyria is as soon as I saw her face, but you couldn't leave her well enough alone. No! Apparently, Valkyrian souls come with mountain-sized marshmallowish mounds of mouth-watering memories. And if you look down their class, you get to see the Uncanny Valley! God damn it, Sega! I want to make it abundantly clear that there's nothing wrong with the concept of revenge in storytelling. Hell, this entire first season of this show was fueled by spite for those that have wronged me. You see, something magical happens with certain forms of vengeance. When the intense fires of hate fade, the tears begin to fall. Grieving, sorrow, and loss soon replace what once was the desire to destroy and cause harm. Until there comes a moment where you look around and realizing you're accomplishing something that goes beyond your own selfish interests. This is what I believe was the intended message of Valkyria Revolution. This game should have had a dark first act, a second act filled with sorrow and loss, and the third needed to be filled with hope and optimism. Essentially, running through the stages of grief and moving onward into the bright new future for the main protagonists and also for Jutland. Essentially, there has to be a gradual shift in tone so that the theme doesn't come across as abrupt. But I digress. Valkyria Revolution is about as blunt as the box it came in, which is a damn shame because they could have turned the JRPG genre on its head. Everything in Valkyria Revolution feels so heavily focus tested that it loses any sense of identity it might have had. Actually, scrap that. What Valkyria Revolution feels like is that someone made an incredibly generic JRPG that the studios realized wouldn't sell well, so they slapped the Valkyria name on it. After putting 120 hours into my save file and unlocking the full ending, I still don't feel like I was given a satisfying experience. This is the one game from Sega that, in all honesty, makes me wonder what the hell were they even thinking? With bland characters, boring combat, predictable plot, and next to no replayability, Valkyria Revolution is my worst game of 2017. Skip it. I'm SonicMTD. In war, anime war never changes. Nah.
Thank you so much for catching episode 9 of Always Right Reviews. My name is Matthew Tyler DeLeo, better known as SonicMTD. Please be sure to like and subscribe and leave me a comment in the comment section down below. And if you take a look at the description of this video, you will also see affiliate channels where I lend my talent and expertise to, such as What to Play Gaming, where me, Medium Mike, and Sneaky Sam play video games and have an awesome time with our commentary. as well as over at North of Nerdy, where I help out some of my co-hosts over with the Nerds Unlimited podcast, which our first episode of the year should be coming up this weekend, so I'm looking very much forward to it. If you click some of the links that are located up here, it'll be a video that YouTube recommends that you watch, and down here is going to be the entire playlist of Always Right Reviews. So if this is your first video in the series, first of all, welcome, and be sure to take a look at the other videos that were part of this season. Either way, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I, of course, am SonicMTD. Arigato gozaimasu, and later days.